Nakumana tikashinga, vasikana tikashinga. Vachidiki tikashinga, vanamai tikashinga.
Nyika yasununguka, nyika yasununguka,
vanamai mukashinga, vanamai mukashinga,
nyika yasununguka, nyika yasununguka,
vakomana tikashinga isu, vakomana tikashinga.
nyika yasununguka, nyika yasununguka,
Tikasungwa tikashinga isu, tikarowa tikashinga isu,
nyika yasununguka,
tikashinga.
nyika yasununguka,
Vanamai mukasungwa ine, vanamai mukarowa ine.
nyika yasununguka, nyika yasununguka,
Kuchipinge mukashinga ine, kwamutoko mukashinga ine.
nyika yasununguka,
Mukashinga,
nyika yasununguka,
uwe.
It's a very good afternoon to you all, members of the Fourth Estate, all of those who are joining us online. Welcome to this special press briefing that we're hosting. The purpose of this press briefing is to address the CCC, or the Citizens Movement's position on Zimbabwe's readmission to the Commonwealth. Just to bring everyone up to speed, as you're going to hear very shortly from our Change Champion-in-Chief, there is a citizens delegation that met with the Commonwealth grouping today, and our Change Champion-in-Chief, Advocate Nelson Chamisa, is shortly going to share the substance of, or the key points relating to that briefing, as well as the position of our movement in connection with that. So without further ado, I'm going to defer proceedings to our Chief Spokesperson.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you, Change Champion, Advocate Mahere. Thank you, members of the press. Thank you, Change Champions here present. Today, we just met our colleagues, the delegation of the Commonwealth, led by Assistant Secretary Professor Louis Franceschi. As a citizen movement, and as the next government in Zimbabwe, we participated in this meeting fully aware and conscious of the obligation that we have, the obligation to make sure that we participate in the ongoing consultative processes, the engagement process that seeks to see Zimbabwe being readmitted into the Commonwealth. We took the opportunity to brief the Commonwealth on a number of issues. In particular, we focused on the political situation in Zimbabwe. We emphasized what is obtaining in the country in terms of the political climate, the breakdown and state of the rule of law, the situation and circumstances to do with the human rights in Zimbabwe. And of course, we also zeroed in on the issue of the electoral environment, the economic situation, and the corruption that is obtained. I'll highlight our major issues and areas of focus as we submitted our recommendations and our position on the political climate and the breakdown of the rule of law. We emphasize that Zimbabwe essentially suffers from a crisis of governance. It is a crisis that is born out of disputed elections, illegitimacy, and we have noted that Zimbabwe is buffeted by a set of circumstances that have germinated acrimony, division, disputed national processes and outcomes, a disputed leadership, toxicity, the lack of legitimacy. This has essentially been the problem of Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is in a leadership crisis. Zimbabwe is in a legitimacy crisis, a governance crisis. We noted the absence of a genuine, inclusive, and comprehensive dialogue in Zimbabwe. We made reference to the closure of the democratic space. We made emphasis on the fact that we are seeing an increase in the repressive tendencies and dictatorial tendencies on the part of the incumbent government. And we made reference to the issue of the PVO bill, the Private Voluntary Organization Bill, MOPA, the Maintenance of Order and Peace Act, the proposed Patriotic Bill. We highlighted that the attack and persecution of the civil society in Zimbabwe is an alarming one, including targeting of human rights defenders, trade unions, the student movement, our teachers, our journalists, lawyers, and in some circumstances, the church. Politicians from different outfits have been targeted. Those from the citizens' movement, the CCC, have not been spared. We have also seen that a number of them have also been targeted, particularly the MRP activists who are incarcerated. And what shocks us, and we shared this with the Commonwealth, is the inability and incapacity of our police, the Zimbabwe Republic Police, perhaps incapacitated by ZANU-PF. They seem to have this inability to deal with the challenges and incidents of incitement of violence, especially by cabinet ministers. We've seen cabinet ministers making statements that incite violence, but nothing has happened. You know the names. It's public, it's common cause. Nothing has been done to these individuals in government. On the human rights situation, we noted the deteriorating human rights situation in the country, in particular, the selective application and weaponization of the law, the persecution by prosecution. We've seen pre-trial incarceration on the increase, denial of bail where bail is due and a constitutional right. In particular, we noted the issue of the Nyatsime 17, who did spend over 150 days on account of a mere allegation. An allegation is not a conviction. An allegation is simply that, just an allegation. It has to be proved. We've seen our members of parliament being persecuted, Honorable Scala, Job, and Stole Godfrey. They're part of the 17 that have been incarcerated. We also highlighted the plight of political prisoners from other political parties, as I have already indicated, MRP included. The abduction and torture of our members, cases that are before the police. The murder of our activists, Mboneni Ngwe and others, violence against women, you know what happened to Honorable Tofa, the weaponization of food, particularly in the rural areas, where we have seen an increase in abuse and victimization of traditional leaders for partisan purposes, instigated with impunity and immunity by ZANU-PF from their topmost echelons. ZANU-PF members continue to incite and perpetrate violence with reckless abandon, and this must be tamed and arrested. On the electoral environment, we note the general lack of political will to implement a credible, inclusive, and a comprehensive electoral reform regime. The electoral environment has been marred by political violence, violation of the right to vote, refusal to implement the diaspora vote, and we have made the point that there is no taxation without representation. If you are receiving remittances from the diaspora, surely you must be able to also accept that they have to vote and express themselves. We also made the mention of the issue of the credible voters' roll. That has to be availed to all the participants, the stakeholders. The issue of an independent audit firm. We want the voters' roll that is going to be used in 2023 to be audited by a reputable firm, so that we do not have a shambolic voters' roll, a disputed voters' roll, and a discredited one. The issue of lack of a real-time, verifiable, and accountable results management system continues to be a source of concern. You saw what happened in Kenya. You saw what happened in Angola. Results have to be real-time. Results have to be posted onto a public portal wherein people are able to assess and access the results, including members of the press. We have also made the mention of the point of the credibility and independence of the electoral management body. There has been an emphasis on the security of the vote and the voter, particularly in the rural areas where we have seen an escalation in assisted voters and command voting. There's also been an increase, as I have already indicated, of political violence against citizens, including Honorable Tofa, our female MP, and other political leaders and activists from across the length and breadth of Zimbabwe. We've seen the disruption and banning of our political meetings and a violation of that important freedom, the freedom of association and freedom of assembly, including even press conferences. On the economic front, we made and underscored the point that 49% of Zimbabweans now live in deadening, extreme, and abject poverty. And we highlighted that the general situation and hardship in the country has escalated. The situation is now worse. There's been an escalation in suffering of the people, particularly on account of bad governance, economic mismanagement, corruption, and a disputed leadership. Zimbabweans do not have access to public services, including healthcare, quality education, social security, and safety nets. Poverty and economic hardship are all as a result of bad governance. And this has forced over 5 million Zimbabweans to flee the country. Over 2 billion is lost to corruption and illicit financial flows annually. And over the years, we've also seen that 100 million is lost just to smuggling each month. And I must emphasize that the fact that you have the Commonwealth coming to Zimbabwe at this particular juncture, hardly some few months ago, we also had the United Nations special rapporteur to deal with the sanctions. There was a humanitarian report. We've had a number of delegations coming to Zimbabwe. What it tells you is that Zimbabwe is in a difficult situation. Zimbabwe is being treated as a sick country that has to come out of hospital, that has to come out of the sick bed. And that sickness is supposed to be cured by all of us as citizens. And this is why, in our proposal of a way forward, to make sure that we move out of this drug rehabilitation as a drug rehab victim, we need to do a number of things. And this is our way forward. We want what is good for the country, what is good for Zimbabwe. We support everything that stands for and respects the Constitution, the citizens of Zimbabwe, and the people's rights. As the next government, the incoming government. Our firm view is that Zimbabwe must normalize relations with all progressive forces, nations, and global institutions, including the Commonwealth, in pursuit of mutual cooperation and national interests. In any event, the original withdrawal from the Commonwealth by Zimbabwe was partisan, ill-conceived, not done in line with national interests, unilateral, and we opposed it then, as we oppose it now. It was not done in pursuant of common national interest. And currently, ZANU-PF and bad politics is standing in the way of Zimbabwe being readmitted into the Commonwealth. This is why we continue to speak to ZANU-PF, to our colleagues across the political divide, to also respect the need for good governance, the need for respecting their competitors, the need for respecting citizens, so that we are able to start building bridges. We have seen that over the past few years, our colleagues in ZANU-PF, instead of building bridges, they've decided to build walls. Instead of maintaining gates unto the world, they've erected iron gates that obstruct our access to the world. We call for a value-based, principles-driven, time-bound and process-benchmarked readmission of Zimbabwe to the Commonwealth, guided by the Commonwealth Charter itself and the Harare Commonwealth Declaration of 1991. We make the position clear that as Zimbabweans, we need to find each other. At the moment, we've failed to find each other. We are talking at each other, against each other. We need to start talking to each other to resolve our fundamental challenges. It takes two to tango. There is no nation that is one side. There is no nation that is one party. A nation is all parties. We have to come together and reason as a people to resolve our issues so that we terminate disputed issues in politics, in national processes. Zimbabwe needs a sincere, genuine national dialogue on political and electoral reforms, underwritten and scaffolded by a credible arbiter, facilitator, or a moderator, so that the process is credible. The holding of credible, free, and fair elections should be a benchmark and a test case for a process to readmit Zimbabwe into the Commonwealth. And because of this, we emphasize the environment that leads to the elections in 2023, which has to be peaceful, it has to be inclusive, and it has to be credible, so that the election itself is beyond contestation and disputation. We have already emphasized that within SADC, let the guidelines and principles governing democratic elections and the African Charter on Democracy and Governance be the benchmark and the standard. That position stands. And that was our submission to our colleagues, the delegation that came representing the Commonwealth. I thank you. God bless you. God bless Zimbabwe.
So as usual, we're going to take a few questions arising from the press briefing that's been delivered by Advocate Nelson Chamisa. As is our usual procedure, kindly identify yourself, the news house or media outlet that you're coming from, and then ask one question so that we can get as many as possible. We'll just take a few because the President has to attend to another engagement, but we do want to make sure that we thoroughly canvass the question of Zimbabwe's readmission to the Commonwealth. Yes, sir.
My name is Lafi. I'm from 254.
Yes, Lafi.
Okay. So after you meeting with the Commonwealth delegation and you get the new position, what was their response to your issues?
Well, the most important thing is to hear two sides to the story. There is no full story without sides. They've heard our side. I'm sure they also heard the side of ZANU-PF. I'm sure they are going to also try and get the ZANU-PF president's side, Mr. Mnangagwa. That's why we have said this is our take, this is our view, and this is what we have submitted. As to their decision, we await their feedback, but we are gratified that we had the opportunity to represent Zimbabweans. I know that what we said is a representation of the men across the length and breadth of Zimbabwe who would want to see Zimbabwe normalizing relations. In fact, we should not be having enemies around the world. We must be having friends around the world. But of course, any nation would have enemies. But ours must be an effort to make sure that we build more friends than we deliberately create enemies.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lovejoy. Are there any other questions? Yes.